The arena of Carvelis was filled with noise, growls, chants, the low hum of translators struggling to keep up. It was the choosing ceremony, the day the young of the Velker Pride selected their combat trainers. For centuries, it had been a sacred tradition. The cubs, each bred from warriors who had conquered worlds, would face the line of chosen mentors and, by instinct, decide who was worthy to lead them into adulthood. This year, however, was different. Among the towering Velker veterans, one figure stood out, a human. Commander Elise Ward. Unarmored, unarmed, and by Velker standards, painfully fragile. She looked like a breeze might break her. Yet she stood with hands behind her back, steady and calm, eyes sharp as any predator's. Whispers hissed through the ranks. Why is the prey species here? Another human stunt? Let's see how long she lasts before a cub tears her apart. Elise heard it all. She didn't care. She had been invited or challenged, depending on who told the story, by High Warlord Drakthar himself. The Velker wanted to prove a point, that humans might be clever, but they were weak in the true language of power, instinct, and dominance. Now, 20 cubs, sleek, muscular, each with teeth like daggers, stood in the sand, waiting for the signal to choose. A horn sounded. The choosing began. One by one, the cubs turned toward the line of mentors. The air vibrated with low growls and tension. A few cubs padded forward to stand beside massive Velker warriors, bowing slightly, a show of respect. The crowd roared its approval. Then something strange happened. A cub with silver fur, barely the size of a wolf, turned its head toward Elise. It froze, watching her. She didn't move, didn't meet its eyes. She simply breathed, steady and quiet. The cub let out a curious chirr. Then it walked, strode, across the arena, tail held high. The other cubs stopped to watch. The silver one stopped before Elise, looked up at her, sat down. Silence fell. Then another cub followed, and another. 5, 10, 14. Within minutes, every single cub had walked past their own kind, past their towering, scarred, roaring Velker trainers, and sat neatly at the humans' feet. The arena went deathly quiet. High Warlord Drakthar's crest flared crimson. "What trickery is this?" he roared. Elise looked down at the cubs circling her, tails brushing her boots. "No trickery," she said. "They simply chose." They didn't believe her, of course. The elders ordered another trial. They made her stand apart again, this time behind a containment field. They released scent lures to attract the cubs to the Velker warriors. They even used audio cues mimicking their mother's calls. It didn't matter. Every time the cubs found her, sat in front of her, stared up, unblinking, as though she carried the gravity of a star. One even growled when a Velker warrior tried to drag it away. The humans watching from the observation deck exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen this before. Elise had the presence. That quiet, commanding confidence humans had evolved back on their home world, a planet of predators, storms, and endless struggle. The kind of aura that came not from dominance, but from something older. Mutual recognition. Predator to predator. Drakthar couldn't let it stand. He summoned Elise to his chamber that night. The room was built from black volcanic stone, lined with trophies, skulls, blades, the armor of fallen foes. He paced like a caged beast. "You humiliate my warriors before the cubs," he growled. "You make them doubt their bloodline. Explain yourself, human." Elise folded her arms. "Maybe they didn't choose power," she said. "Maybe they chose control." He bared his fangs. "They chose weakness." She met his gaze, unflinching. "No. They chose someone who doesn't need to prove her strength every 5 minutes." The silence between them was heavier than gravity. For a heartbeat, Drakthar thought about tearing her apart. For another, he saw something in her eyes that stopped him. Something colder than fear. She reminded him of the old predators of Velker Prime, creatures that killed not for hunger, but for precision. He grunted. "The cubs will stay with you," he said finally. "If they survive your training, perhaps there is merit in your methods. If not, your bones will join my wall." Elise smiled faintly. "Fair deal." Training began at dawn. The Velker soldiers watched from the edge of the arena, expecting carnage. But Elise didn't roar, didn't strike, didn't dominate. She waited. When the cubs snapped or growled, she ignored them. When they tested her with lunges, she simply sidestepped. When one actually managed to knock her over, she laughed. And that laughter did something to them. They began to play instead of attack. Within a week, the cubs obeyed her voice. Within 2, they followed her hand signals. Within a month, they were synchronized, moving as one, silent and deadly, like extensions of her own will. Velker trainers had never achieved such unity. They used fear to teach obedience. Elise used trust to build loyalty. One night, a storm struck the base. Lightning split the mountains. Power grids failed. Something breached the perimeter. A rogue apex predator, massive and armored, a creature even Velker soldiers avoided. The alarm blared through barracks. Drakthar and his guards rushed to the arena, only to find the power flickering and Elise standing alone in the sand. The beast loomed over her, 12 feet tall, drooling acid. And around her feet, 20 cubs growled as one. She whispered a single command. The cubs leapt. In seconds, they were on the monster's back, claws slicing through hide, teeth tearing into weak points. Elise ducked under a massive claw, rolled, and drove a shock baton into its exposed nerve clusters. The creature fell with a roar that shook the valley. When it was over, she stood drenched in rain and blood, surrounded by panting cubs. They nuzzled her legs, whining softly. Drakthar watched from the shadows, disbelief in his eyes. She had turned cubs into a pack, a family. The next morning, the High Warlord called council. Every elder attended. He stood before them, looking out at the cubs sleeping around the humans' boots. "For the first time in Velker history," he said, "a foreigner has taught our young." He paused, voice low. "And they have surpassed." Elise inclined her head. "They were never mine to command," she said. "I just reminded them what they already knew, to fight for something greater than themselves." The council bowed their heads. That evening, the cubs were given their official markings. Not as students of the Velker War Academy, but as the Ward Pack, named after the human who had earned the right no outsider ever had. Years passed. The Ward Pack grew into legends. When the Dominion Wars erupted, it was those same cubs, now towering hunters with starship-grade armor, who led the charge beside human marines. Their strategies were cleaner, their instincts sharper, their bond unbreakable. They became the first multi-species elite strike unit in galactic history. And when asked by young recruits why they followed a human, their leader, Shadowfang, always gave the same answer. Because she never taught us to obey. She taught us to choose. On the 10th anniversary of the choosing day, Elise returned to Carvelis. She was older now, hair streaked with gray, her once smooth hands scarred from battles across half the galaxy. The arena stood silent, but the walls still bore the marks of cub claws and human footprints. From the jungle's edge came a rumble, a chorus of deep growls. She smiled.